Hey there, Lincoln County. This is Dr. Allen, your superintendent, coming to you today for National Read Across America Day. That's right. It is time to think about all the stuff that we do with reading books and just making sure that we are drawing attention to doing our best to set a good example for our children and for each other about the things that we choose to read. You know, I have a little action figures in my office here to remind me of some things, and so I want to think about it from this way: whether we choose to read for pleasure, and so I've got a little Flash action figure and Hulk. So we might read comics to get lost in adventure and in that kind of world. We may choose to read about nonfiction. We may choose to read some stuff about worms or maybe about dinosaurs and science stuff. Whether we choose to read about sometimes real life events about possible war history, or whether we read about mystery or spookiness or fables or stories. This one's a picture of a mummy, a ghost, those kind of things, or whatever excites you. Or whether we might want to read about some nonfiction about agriculture and just about animals specifically. Some of our favorite animals are some of the things we get to know so much about, whether it's cows or sharks or dinosaurs, those things that elementary kids just love to fascinate on. Or whether we read about how to take things apart or how they work. So tractors and trucks and tools and just machines in general. There's so much things that we can read about. Growing up, the little golden books were a staple in our house and in many media centers across the world, and especially in this area. Think about the value of reading, what this does through Dolly Parton's Imagine Library that you can sign up for to get free books from an elementary age. I'm proud to say that part of what we do is we give a book to every newborn in Lincoln, the hospital at Atrium Lincoln. We give all the new children that are born a book from us, so parents can start off even out of the hospital reading to their child every day. Statistics show that kids who read advance quicker in school, no more, do better on standardized testing, but it's also have lower stress levels and better aptitude for vision and for ingenuity and for imagination. So, if you will, go with me in a little time that I can spend taking you back into your childhood, or for kids that may be listening to this, understanding that this might be your first time hearing this book, but it's The Tale of Peter Rabbit. And so I want to just spend time doing a little read aloud for you. And so The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. Okay. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dears," said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields or down into the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father has an accident there, and he was put in a pie by Mr. McGregor. Oh, dear. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I'm going out," as all good parents do, give some directions and get on out of the house. Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the woods to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail were all good little bunnies, and they went down the lane together to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, are you any of you out there very naughty that doesn't listen to instructions? But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away into Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. First, he ate some lettuce and some French beans, and he ate some radishes, all of which I'm sure all of you children are eating at home too. And then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. But round the end of the cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages when he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop! Stop, thief!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes amongst the cabbages and the other shoe in the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on all 4 legs and went faster. Oh, so that I think he may have gotten away altogether if he had not unfortunately ran into the gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a large blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave himself up for the loss and shed big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. That means push, get out of there, Peter. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter. You can see that. It's kind of a net, a trap. But Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him, and rushed out to the tool shed and jumped into the can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. Whoops. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn over them carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter sneezed. "Kerchoo!" Mr. McGregor was after him in no time and tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of the window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to work. Just gave up. Or did he? Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea of which way to go. Also, he was very damp from sitting in the can. After a time, he began to wonder about going lippity-lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. Starting to explore again. That's what got him in trouble the first time. He found a door in the wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way out the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Poor Peter. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently he came upon a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still. Can you sit very still for long? But now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if she were alive. Peter thought it would be best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. Probably not somebody he wants to talk to. He went back towards the tool shed, and suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe. Screech, scratch, 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 screech. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes, frightened. But presently, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed upon the wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned toward Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could along a straight walk behind some black currant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside of the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and shoes for a scarecrow to frighten off the blackbirds. Old Peter's stuff, he's up there on the pole. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him until he got home to the big fir tree. He was tired, and then he flopped down on the nice soft sand at the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done to his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. I am sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter. 1 tablespoon to be taken at bedtime. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. I hope you enjoyed this read aloud for The Tale of Peter Rabbit. It's one of my favorites growing up, and hopefully it's one of yours too. But at the end of the day, parents and anyone listening to this, just take time to read for yourself for pleasure. As I mentioned before, it is shown to help with reducing your stress, preparing you better mentally, and also giving you a habit to grow into. You know, we all read to learn, and we are all continuing to learn to read, whether it's online, whether it's in print, whether it is on our devices or any of that stuff. We're all the time reading. So make sure that you take time to show others how to model good reading and good reading habits.